My husband cheated with his PT, and I'm planning for sweet revenge by befriending his PT and returning all the favors they gave me. I'm Victoria 31, with what I thought was a dream job, a cozy home, and a marriage that felt right out of a rom-com. But then, out of the blue, Aaron, my usually laid-back husband who'd rather spend his evenings with a cold beer in front of the TV, started changing his stripes. One day he's your typical beer-loving couch potato, and the next, he swapped the remote for dumbbells and is hitting the gym with a reel that's honestly baffling. It wasn't just a casual, maybe I'll lose a couple of pounds kind of gym routine. No, Aaron was on it like he was training for the Olympics or something. Gym sessions 7 days a week, sometimes even twice a day. I first noticed something was off when he started leaving for the gym at odd hours. "Got to beat the rush," he'd say with a sort of manic gleam in his eye that I hadn't seen before. The guy who used to scoff at my yoga sessions was suddenly talking about protein shakes, muscle gains, and rest days like he'd been doing it all his life. His wardrobe changed too. Out went the old college tees and sweatpants, and in came the sleek high-tech gym wear. He even started wearing a new cologne that smells more like something a suave, young gym trainer would wear, not the man I married. I tried talking to him about his sudden obsession, trying to find out if something was triggering it. Was it a late quarter-life crisis? Was he feeling okay? Each time, he brushed off my concerns with a quick peck on the cheek and a vague, "Just trying to stay healthy, babe." But his eyes, they darted away too quickly, hiding something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just the physical changes though. He became more secretive, his phone suddenly always face down. I noticed our bank statements had charges from a high-end sports store, money spent on fancy gym equipment and supplements. The man I knew, who would rather die than miss a Friday night pizza, was now all about carb cycling and meal prep Sundays. And then there were the late returns home. The gym was supposedly a 10-minute drive away, yet Aaron would be gone for hours. Traffic was a nightmare, he'd say, or met an old buddy for a protein shake. Excuses that seemed plausible at first but started to wear thin with every passing week. The warmth in his voice cooled, and the distance grew, filling the space between us with a tension I couldn't ignore. That's when the dots started connecting in my mind, drawing a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. My husband, the man who promised to grow old and gray with me, was slipping away, morphing into a stranger with each pumped-up sweat-slicked gym session. That day, my gut just wouldn't settle. The whispers of doubt and the tickle of suspicion had grown too loud to ignore. So, I did what anyone would do when plagued by the creeping dread that something in their marriage was amiss. I decided to follow Aaron. I told myself it was to put my mind at ease, to prove my suspicions wrong. But honestly, deep down, part of me feared I was right. I parked a couple of rows back from his usual spot at the gym, my heart hammering as I watched him pull in. I remember thinking how absurd this all was, spying on my own husband. It felt like something out of a cheesy detective show, not something I should be doing on a bright Wednesday morning. But there I was, hunched down in my seat, baseball cap pulled low over my eyes, hoping against hope I was just being paranoid. But then she appeared, Monica, his personal trainer. I recognized her from the Christmas party the gym hosted last year. She was hard to forget with her bright smile and energetic aura that seemed to captivate everyone around her, including, apparently, my husband. I watched, heart sinking as they met by her car, not far from where I was hiding. Their casual smiles didn't prepare me for what happened next. It was just a moment, but it felt like an eternity. They looked around cautiously before Aaron leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a peck or a friendly kiss. It was deep, passionate, the kind that you don't share with just anyone. It felt like a punch to the gut. Watching them, hidden behind my car window, my hands trembling and a lump forming in my throat. Devastated didn't even begin to cover how I felt. Betrayed, broken, foolish, all of that and more. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing and my heart shattered. That night, as Aaron lay sleeping beside me, oblivious to the storm raging inside me, I did something I never thought I would. I reached for his phone, which he'd casually tossed on the nightstand, his carelessness now another knife in my back. The phone lit up. And there it was, the evidence as clear as day. Texts from Monica, so casual, so intimate. They talked like old lovers, comfortable and familiar. The messages cut through me, each word a confirmation of my worst fears. "I hope your husband stays in the dark. We have a strict policy regarding our distance from clients and I'd rather not have any conflict at work. I adore you though. My dear, I am waiting for you. What is the estimated time of arrival? After our workout today, how about we have dinner at our favorite restaurant? Their lunch menu features some of the tastiest foods that are gluten-free and low in carbs." It was like reading lines from a script meant for a life I was no longer part of. How could he? How could they? She knew about me. Yet it didn't stop her. It didn't stop him. I put the phone back, my hands shaking, my mind a mess of anger, pain, and an overwhelming sense of loss. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? Those questions haunted me through the night, keeping me awake as I lay next to the man who had promised to love and cherish me, now a stranger in our bed. I could barely get through 3 or 4 messages before I gave up because I was so repulsive. I didn't want Aaron to think something was wrong when he was on the toilet. I pretended to be asleep as I went to sleep after taking a deep breath and placing my phone on the side table. That night, after I saw those messages, felt like one of the longest of my life. Every word between Aaron and Monica was a dagger in my heart. I could only stomach a few messages, their plans, their affection for each other, so carefree and intimate, before I felt physically ill. The thought of continuing, of seeing more proof of the betrayal, was too much. I tossed Aaron's phone back onto the nightstand, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and sorrow. Lying in bed next to him, pretending to be asleep, was torture. I wanted so badly to wake him, to confront him right then and there. I imagined myself shaking him awake, demanding answers, or better yet, screaming until I was hoarse. Anything to release the storm of emotions brewing inside me. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't get me anywhere. Aaron would have an excuse, a story cooked up and ready to serve. He always had his way with words. And that's when it hit me. The need for a plan, a scheme that would reveal the true extent of his deceit not just to me, but to him as well. I needed him to feel a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on me. No sudden outbursts, or tearful confrontations. This needed to be strategic, something that would hit him where it hurt most. So, I spent the rest of the night plotting, turning over scenarios in my mind. Each plan more elaborate than the last, until I settled on something fiendishly simple yet satisfying. I decided I would meet Monica. I would get close to her, enter their little world under the guise of innocence, and see for myself the web of lies I was up against. Maybe even gather enough evidence to turn their affair on its head. The morning after that sleepless night was oddly serene. As Aaron left for work with a hurried kiss that lacked its usual warmth, I felt a mix of nervous energy and steely determination. I was ready to put my plan into action. The drive to the gym was a blur, my mind reeling with what I was about to do. I pulled into the gym parking lot, the same place where I'd seen Aaron and Monica in their embrace. My hands were steady on the wheel, my resolve firm. I rehearsed what I would say to Monica, how I would confront her, and then expose her to her supervisor. It seemed straightforward enough: walk in, reveal the affair, watch her face crumble. Simple, yet satisfying. The gym was bustling with the usual morning crowd, people lost in their routines, headphones in, worlds unto themselves. I spotted Monica almost immediately, her vibrant energy unmistakable as she laughed with a client. Seeing her there, so carefree, fueled my resolve. I steeled myself and walked towards her, ready for confrontation. But just as I was about to approach, something unexpected happened. Monica's client, an elderly woman I recognized from some community events, suddenly lost her balance on the treadmill. Monica's quick reflexes saved the woman from a nasty fall, and she handled the situation with such genuine care and professionalism that it took me aback. It was a side of her I hadn't anticipated, compassionate, skilled, entirely at odds with the homewrecker I had painted in my mind. For a moment, I hesitated. The gym fell into a sudden hush as other trainers and clients rushed over to help, and Monica was right there, directing them, ensuring the woman was attended to before anything else. After the woman was taken care of and the commotion settled, Monica turned, and her eyes met mine. I moved forward, my original intent simmering beneath a surface of newfound complexity. As I approached, she greeted me with a bright, unsuspecting smile, so dazzling it could have blinded me as I entered the gym. "Hello, how are you doing? Can I help you with something?" Her voice was warm, inviting. As it was, she had no idea I even existed. The irony was too good to ignore. I paused, the words I had rehearsed suddenly heavy on my tongue. In that moment, my plan shifted. Instead of the harsh confrontation I had envisioned, I found myself saying, "Yes, I'm looking for a personal trainer. Can we talk?" I realized I had to stop before I could interrupt her and reveal that I wasn't just some client trying to get in shape. Rather, I was the wife of her lover. So I agreed to it rather than make a scene. Monica smiled. Her smile widened. "Of course. Let's sit down and discuss what you're looking for." Obviously happy to welcome a new customer. After making that fake appointment, I left the gym with a smirk tugging at the corners of my mouth. The irony of the situation was delicious. Monica, the woman who was unknowingly wrecking my marriage, was now scheduled to be my personal trainer. As I drove away, thoughts of the upcoming encounter danced in my head. If only she knew who I really was and the secret agenda hidden behind my friendly facade. Our first training session was a mix of awkwardness for me and professionalism for her. Monica was all smiles, demonstrating routines and correcting my posture with a gentle touch here and there. It was an odd feeling, playing the part of a clueless client, knowing all too well the intimate details of her relationship with Aaron. As weeks turned into months, our sessions became a regular part of my life. Monica started opening up about her life, her dreams, and ironically, her challenges with past relationships. The more I knew about her, the more complex my feelings became. She wasn't just the other woman in my husband's life. She was a person with her own stories and struggles. Our relationship evolved beyond the gym. Coffee dates after a sweaty session became our thing. We'd laugh over lattes about silly gym mishaps or debate the best protein bars. On weekends we sometimes went shopping, browsing through racks of clothing, joking and offering fashion advice like old college friends. Throughout this time, I was changing. The physical strength I gained from workouts was just one aspect. Emotionally, I was becoming someone new, more resilient, more composed, and somehow more understanding. Monica was inadvertently sculpting me into a stronger version of myself, not just physically but in a way that fortified my spirit and resolve. Every coffee sip, every shared smile, I couldn't help but wonder how this would all end. Would revealing my true identity and intentions shatter the bond we had formed? Or would it somehow liberate both of us from the lies that entangled our lives? These thoughts haunted me, but I pushed them aside, focusing on the present, on the strength I was gaining and the intricate dance of friendship and deception that was unfolding. It was a game of emotional chess, and I was making my moves with cautious precision. As the weeks slipped by, Aaron couldn't help but notice the changes in me. It wasn't just the obvious physical transformation, the toned arms, the firmer stance, the way my clothes hung a little looser around a slimming waist. It was more than that. There was a new light in my eyes, a spark of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Something that reminded him of the woman he fell in love with, only stronger, more confident. Each time I spoke of my new friend, the mysterious personal trainer who was helping me find myself again, I could see the curiosity tinged with suspicion in his eyes. He'd never met Monica, of course. I kept her identity and our sessions vague, a deliberate mystique added to keep him on edge. She's just amazing. So inspiring. I'd say casually over dinner, watching his expression change, a mixture of intrigue and unease playing across his features. This wasn't meant to be a part of my initial plan, but I couldn't deny the satisfaction it brought me. Aaron's growing fascination with my changes had an unexpected, yet welcome side effect. He started pulling away from Monica, perhaps intimidated by my independence, or maybe out of guilt, fearing that his own secrets might unravel as I embraced this new version of myself. His texts became less frequent, his late nights shortened, and his mentions of the gym carried a hint of obligation rather than enthusiasm. Monica, on her part, seemed unaware of the shift in Aaron's behavior. With him stepping back, she had more time on her hands, time that she often chose to spend with me. But with every passing day, as our friendship grew, so did my internal conflict. The lines between deception and genuine connection blurred, leaving me to grapple with the unfolding moral complexities of my actions. Was the satisfaction of seeing Aaron's guilt and confusion worth the potential cost of betraying someone who was, despite everything, becoming a real friend? That evening was tinged with an unusual tension as Aaron lingered by the doorway, watching me with a mixture of hope and desperation. The usual hum of our home felt quieter, more charged. Maybe it was the way the sunset threw shadows across the living room, or maybe it was the unspoken words hanging between us, but everything felt different. "Hey Vic, how about dinner? At our favorite restaurant, of course. I'll be home at 6 so we can spend some quality time together and eat some delicious food." Huh? His voice had that old familiar warmth, but the edges were frayed with anxiety. As he spoke, he reached out, his fingers gently massaging my hair in a way he knew I once loved. It felt like a plea, a subtle beg for the evening to erase the growing distance he surely felt but couldn't understand. I paused, feeling the weight of his gaze, heavy with unasked questions. My response was ready, a part of the script I had been silently writing in my mind over the past months. "I have to meet my boyfriend, but I would really like to. Since I can't break my word, this is essential." "Maybe another time," I said, the words light and airy, as if I was talking about something as mundane as a coffee date, not dropping the bombshell that I had someone new in my life. The smile I offered was measured, just wide enough to seem genuine but hiding the turbulence underneath. I picked up my purse. Feeling his stare intensify, burning into me with a mix of confusion and the dawning realization of what I had just said. Turning towards the door, I could feel the shift in the air, the slight catch of his breath, the soft shuffle of his feet. A man unmoored. Aaron's confusion was palpable, his voice faltering as he repeated, "Boyfriend?" The word hung awkwardly between us, heavy and out of place. His eyes searched mine for a joke, a hint that this was just a tease, a playful jab like those we used to share. But all he found was my back as I walked towards the door, the click of my heels punctuating this new distance between us. As I stepped out, I couldn't help but suppress a chuckle, not out of amusement, but from the sheer surrealness of the moment. Here I was, spinning tales and weaving webs, playing a role that months ago I would have never imagined. The evening air was cool, a gentle breeze playing through the trees, a stark contrast to the heated confusion I left behind. I walked to my car, parked under the flickering streetlight at the end of our driveway. Inside, the quiet was profound, a silent witness to the pivotal shift taking place. Sitting there for a moment, I let the weight of my decision sink in. This was more than a dinner invitation, it was the next pivotal move in a game of calculated risks and hidden motives. Pulling out my phone, I found Monica's number and hesitated for just a second. This dinner could cement our friendship or set the stage for the unraveling of everything. The screen lit up as I dialed, casting a glow in the dim light of the car. Monica picked up after a couple of rings, her voice bright and unsuspecting. "Hey Monica, I was thinking, why don't we celebrate our friendship? How about dinner at fancy restaurant's name? It's been such a great journey getting to know you and I think we deserve a little celebration. Just us girls," I said, injecting a cheerful tone into my voice, masking the undercurrent of my true intentions. "Oh, that sounds wonderful, Victoria. I'd love to. When were you thinking?" Monica's enthusiasm was genuine, and for a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt for the deception. "Tomorrow evening works for me. Does 7 p.m. sound good?" I proposed, already planning the sequence of events in my mind. "Perfect, it's a date then. I'll see you there," she replied, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Great, it's a date," I echoed, my words laced with double meanings. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my car a little longer, going over the details of what was to come. The restaurant I had chosen was classy and intimate, an ideal setting for what I had planned. It was popular enough to be a treat but not so crowded as to draw attention to our conversation. I started the car and drove off, the engine's purr a steady backdrop to my racing thoughts. Tomorrow's dinner would be a turning point, one way or another. Either it would push my plans forward, or it would expose cracks in my resolve. But either way, I was ready. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. About stepping out of the shadows of deceit and into a light of my own making. The evening of the dinner was draped in an almost cinematic allure, with the city lights twinkling like distant stars and the restaurant bathed in the soft warm glow of chandeliers. The tables were set with crisp linens and sparkling glassware, creating a refined but inviting ambiance. I arrived a few minutes early, taking a moment to absorb the setting, each detail sharpening my resolve for what was about to unfold. Monica arrived looking radiant, her smile wide as she approached the table. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and for a moment, it was easy to forget the complex web of deceit that had drawn us here. We exchanged pleasantries and sat down, the clink of our glasses punctuating the start of what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. She was about to propose a toast to our friendship, her glass raised in anticipation, when the unexpected happened. The restaurant door opened, and in walked Aaron. His entrance was like a scene straight out of a movie, unexpected, dramatic, and perfectly timed. "Monica, what are you doing here?" The look on his face as he spotted us together was a mix of confusion and shock, his steps faltering as he tried to process the scene before him. "Do you know each other?" Aaron's expression of utter horror was striking. The room seemed to stand still, the background noise fading into a muted hush as all eyes turned toward our table. I saw regret wash over him. Monica's glass hovered in mid-air, her smile fading into a look of confusion. She turned to me, her eyes searching for an explanation, then back to Aaron, trying to gauge his reaction. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching into eternity as the pieces began to fall into place in her mind. Dressed in a gorgeous red outfit that accentuated my newfound confidence, I maintained my composure, my face a mask of serene confidence. Inside, my heart was racing, but outwardly, I was the picture of calm. "Aaron, how unexpected to see you here," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that churned beneath the surface. Aaron approached our table, his initial shock giving way to a cautious curiosity. "I didn't realize you two knew each other," he said, his eyes darting between us, looking for answers in our expressions. The situation was ripe with irony, the secret connections and hidden truths all converging in this unexpected public confrontation. Monica set her glass down, her cheerful demeanor replaced by a growing realization of the situation's gravity. "Yes. We've become good friends," she managed to say, her voice a mix of defiance and uncertainty. The waiter approached, oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around our table, and cheerfully asked if we were ready to order. It was almost comical, this return to mundane matters after such a dramatic revelation. Aaron waved him away, his mind clearly elsewhere, focused on the unfolding drama. As Aaron stood there, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together in his mind, I could see the conflict play out across his face: surprise, betrayal, realization. It was all there, a silent testimony to the complexity of human emotions. As the tension at our table reached a palpable level, I decided it was time to take control of the evening. Standing up, I took a spoon and gently tapped it against my glass, the clear crisp sound cutting through the murmur of the restaurant. Heads turned toward us, curious eyes and hushed whispers filling the room as I prepared to address the gathered crowd. "Good evening everyone," I began, my voice steady and projecting a confidence that I felt was crucial to maintain in that moment. "Let me introduce myself as Victoria, and say how much I appreciate these two individuals in my life." I gestured gracefully towards Aaron and Monica, giving them each a nod that was both acknowledging and measured. The room fell into a deeper silence, the patrons and staff alike sensing the unfolding drama. "I appreciate you accepting my invitation to dinner tonight, Aaron and Monica. I would like to share with you," I continued, pausing momentarily, as I noticed Aaron's nervous hand movements. He was fidgeting, his fingers twisting a napkin, his discomfort visible to all. This pause was deliberate, a moment to let the weight of my words sink in, not just for Aaron and Monica, but for everyone in earshot. The clinking of the glass had not only served to silence the room but also to fortify my resolve. As I stood there, with all eyes on me, I felt a mix of empowerment and inevitable sadness. This was not just a revelation, it was an acknowledgement of the significant shifts in my life and relationships. "I've learned a lot about honesty and integrity these past months," I continued, my gaze sweeping over the audience then settling on Aaron and Monica. "Tonight is about truth and revelation. It's about understanding that the choices we make affect not just our lives but those around us. Aaron, Monica, you both have been pivotal in teaching me these lessons." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning and implication. Aaron's eyes widened slightly, a hint of fear or perhaps realization dawning upon him. Monica, ever the composed one, maintained a steady, if somewhat strained smile. But her eyes were cautious, wary of what I might reveal next. "This dinner," I said, pausing to gather my thoughts, "is my way of saying thank you. Thank you for the lessons, for the pain, and for the strength I've gained. It was necessary, and it has prepared me for a new chapter." My voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of deep emotion that I could feel bubbling just beneath the surface. As the dinner guests around us resumed their subdued chatter, I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a more intimate timbre, ensuring that Aaron and Monica could hear every word distinctly. "I have undergone a mental and physical transformation in the last 3 months," I began, my gaze locking onto Aaron's, which flickered with a cocktail of emotions: regret, fear, perhaps a touch of admiration. "Aaron, my love, you saw the change and were scared, right?" His eyes darted away, unable to hold my stare, his discomfort visible as he adjusted his collar, a subtle acknowledgement of my accusation. "You pushed your lover away because you believed you would lose me." Turning slightly, I addressed Monica, who had maintained a composed facade until now. "Furthermore, Monica, my dear friend, you had no idea how important you are to my greater plan." Her expression, which had been one of polite attention, cracked just a bit. The corners of her eyes tightened, her smile faltered, and there was a subtle shift in her posture as she leaned back slightly, as if the weight of my words physically impacted her. Monica's face was a canvas of confusion and dawning realization. The atmosphere at the table thickened, charged with the tension of my revelations. The clatter of cutlery and murmur of voices around us seemed to fade into the background as this private drama unfolded in its own quiet storm. "This was the one she didn't expect," I continued, my voice softer now, more reflective. "You see, every step of my newfound journey, every session at the gym, every coffee, every shopping trip, it wasn't just about rebuilding myself or forming a friendship. It was about setting the stage, about crafting a scenario where the truths could no longer stay hidden." As I spoke these words, I could see the cogs turning in Monica's mind, the pieces falling into place. Her initial shock was replaced by a deeper, more resigned understanding. She looked from me to Aaron, and back again, her eyes narrowing, not with anger, but with a sort of pained acceptance. Aaron, meanwhile, sat frozen, his earlier nervous energy now stilled by the gravity of my words. He knew, in this moment, that the dynamics of our relationships, his with Monica, mine with him, and my unlikely friendship with her, had been irrevocably altered. The facade had not only cracked but shattered, revealing the stark and complicated truths beneath. "The twist is that I found someone new who loves me for who I am," I said, pausing to savor the moment. At that exact moment, an elegant man walked into the restaurant with almost perfect timing. He came straight to our table and took my hand. At that exact moment, his warm touch was all I needed. My announcement, "Everyone, meet my new friend Jack," was met with a mixture of amazement and skepticism from those seated around the table. As far as you're concerned, Aaron, I began, my voice steady and resolute. I'm getting a divorce. I paused, letting the words hang between us, stark and undeniable. Remember our prenup? The one that mentioned cheating. My eyes held his, unflinching, as I watched the realization sink in, the color draining from his face. He opened his mouth, possibly to object or to plead, but no words came. I nodded towards Monica, adding, thanks to my new best friend here, I have all the evidence I need. So, everything you own will soon be mine. Then I turned my attention to Monica, who had been a silent spectator to my revelation to Aaron. Her face was a mask of controlled emotion, but her eyes betrayed a hint of fear, uncertainty about what my words would mean for her. Of course, I'm telling your boss everything, my dear Monica, I continued, the tone of my voice softer, but every bit as firm. It's not a good idea to try to rob someone of their husband. I'm sorry, but it looks like you're going to have to find a new gym. Her reaction was subtle, a slight tightening of her jaw, a fleeting look of resignation. This was not the outcome she had anticipated when she became involved with Aaron, and now she faced the professional repercussions of those choices. The table was silent, the tension like a thick fog around us. The rest of the restaurant carried on unaware, the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversations a distant backdrop to our personal drama. I looked between Aaron and Monica, seeing the impact of my words settling over them. This was not just a confrontation but a declaration of my newfound strength and independence. Turning back to Aaron, I softened my tone slightly, not out of sympathy, but out of a desire to close this chapter with a semblance of dignity. We had good times, Aaron, but you chose this path. I wish things could have been different. The atmosphere in the restaurant was charged as the finality of my words sunk in. Monica's face, previously composed, now mirrored a mix of shock and dawning comprehension as she realized her role in the narrative I had carefully constructed. Her shock was palpable, her eyes wide as she grappled with the realization that she had been merely a pawn in my broader strategy. Across from her, Aaron's complexion turned a ghostly shade of pale, his features etched with disbelief and despair. He opened his mouth to say something, perhaps an apology or an explanation, but the words seemed to fail him. Vic, he began, his voice a hoarse whisper, but I was not there to listen to half-hearted apologies or excuses anymore. Keep it. I've had enough, I interrupted sharply, my tone final, leaving no room for ambiguity. My words cut through the tense air, severing whatever feeble hope Aaron might have held that this could be mended. Monica, still reeling from the revelation, made a feeble attempt to apologize, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't realize. Maybe next time you'll think twice before getting involved with a married man, I said, cutting her off as well. The edge in my voice was not just from bitterness but also from a reborn sense of self-worth, a declaration that I would no longer be a victim in anyone's story, including my own. As Aaron and Monica gathered their things, their movements sluggish, weighed down by their own guilt and regret, they left the restaurant. Their exit was quiet, almost pitiful, a stark contrast to the bombastic drama that had just unfolded. Left at the table with Jack, the friend who had stood by me through this transformation, we watched them leave, a symbolic closure to the chaos that had upended my life. Jack and I then turned to each other, a knowing look between us. We raised our glasses, the crystal catching the light, sparkling as brightly as the resolve in our eyes. To honesty, new love, and perfect revenge, I toasted, the words feeling like a cleansing breath. Jack echoed the sentiment, his smile supportive and understanding. As we clinked glasses, the sounds of the restaurant returned to my awareness, the gentle hum of conversations, the soft music playing in the background, life moving around us. This toast wasn't just about reveling in the downfall of those who had wronged me. It was a celebration of rebirth, of reclaiming control over my narrative and stepping into a future where I was the author of my own life story. Me and my girlfriend were on a romantic trip in Italy after some months of emotional distancing, due to work. Then on the final days she suddenly wanted to stay without me to find herself despite the plan. So I cut her off financially and left. So, here's the deal. Me and my girlfriend of 2 years. Before the whirlwind of my current job kicked in, life with Jay, that's my girlfriend, was pretty much like something out of a feel-good movie. We met at a friend's barbecue and clicked instantly. She had this easy laugh and a way of seeing the funny side of everything, which made every day a bit brighter. We spent countless evenings just walking through the park, cooking together, or binge-watching series. We were that couple always holding hands, always planning the next fun thing. Back then, my work was steady, predictable 9 to 5 hours, so I always had ample time for us. But as things picked up at work, with me stepping into a more demanding role, our dynamics began to shift. It was subtle at first, missing a dinner date here, canceling plans there. I told myself that it was just a busy phase, that I'd regain control of my schedule. Jay was understanding too, always saying she got it, that work was important. But no matter how supportive she tried to be, I could tell it was wearing on her. The past 2 months have really highlighted how strained things have become. My new normal means more late nights, unexpected weekend calls, and constant emailing from home. We see less of each other, and when we do, the exhaustion and stress are palpable. What used to be our downtime has turned into brief, often silent meals, with both of us glued to our phones. The intimacy that came so easily now feels like something we have to schedule, like another task on my to-do list. These changes have brewed undercurrents of resentment. Jay, once so laid back and jovial, now snaps over minor things like forgetting to buy milk or leaving a wet towel on the bed. We argue over these trivialities, but there's always an unspoken heavier air about time, about neglect. We haven't had a big blowout, nothing that dramatic, but there's this constant, nagging feeling of drifting apart, like we're slowly losing grip on what made us us. Recognizing the toll my new job was taking on Jay and me, I knew something had to give. I could see the strain in her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach as far as it used to. It was like watching the color fade from a vibrant painting. Guilt gnawed at me, a constant reminder that I wasn't there for her as much as I should be. She never complained much, but love doesn't need words to express when something's amiss. I decided to plan a vacation, something grand, a gesture to show Jay just how much she meant to me and to perhaps salvage what was becoming of our once effortless connection. Italy seemed like the perfect escape, with its romantic landscapes, rich history, and the promise of delicious food. It was somewhere Jay had mentioned wanting to visit back in our easier days. I imagined us wandering through the streets of Rome, riding a gondola in Venice, and sipping wine under the Tuscan sun, reclaiming the magic that we'd lost to routine and tired, late-night apologies. I handled all the arrangements secretly, booking our flights and picking out the coziest hotels, aiming for a seamless, stress-free experience. When I finally told Jay about the trip, the surprise ignited a spark in her that I hadn't seen in months. The essence of Italy seeped into every moment of our trip, and it seemed each day offered a new adventure, a fresh opportunity to bridge the gap that had formed between us. One evening in Venice stands out vividly in my memory. We had booked a small boat to take us through the winding canals at dusk. The setting sun cast a warm golden glow over the ancient buildings, and the water mirrored the sky, turning our surroundings into a canvas of oranges and pinks. The boatman maneuvered us expertly under low bridges and alongside colorful, slightly tilting buildings. Jay and I sat close, our hands intertwined, the sounds of distant chatter and the gentle splash of water against the boat filling the air. There was a peace in that moment, a quiet contentment that I hadn't felt in months. She rested her head on my shoulder, and it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Another highlight was our romantic dinner in a quaint little restaurant in Rome. Tucked away in a narrow alley lined with ivy-covered walls, the restaurant was Jay's find, a place she had read about in one of her travel blogs. We dined outside under a string of small lights, the atmosphere buzzing with the soft murmur of other diners and the clink of glasses. We indulged in a meal of fresh pasta, drizzled with a truffle sauce that was nothing short of divine, paired with a bottle of local red wine recommended by our waiter. Jay's eyes sparkled under the fairy lights as we talked about plans for the future, about places we still wanted to see, and about starting fresh when we got back home. For a few hours, it felt like we had recaptured the magic of our early days together, laughing and sharing stories with an ease that I had sorely missed. These moments, so full of promise and rediscovery, made the sudden shift on our last day all the more jarring. As we stood on that cliff in Naples, with the vast blue sea stretching out before us, I couldn't help but feel like the picturesque scene was mocking us, presenting a stark contrast to the turmoil that was unfolding between us. Someone's life can't really be like that. That's when she dropped the bombshell. Out of nowhere, Jay told me she needed more time here, in Italy, without me. She told me she wants to stay longer to find herself, and think about our relationship without me. I was stunned. There was no lead-up, no conversation about feeling constrained or unhappy. Not like this. Until that moment, I thought we were healing, getting better, finding our way back to each other. But her words made it clear she felt differently. She hadn't planned this with me, hadn't even hinted at needing more space until that instant. It felt like a betrayal, not just of the plans we'd made together, but of the progress I thought we'd been making. I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me, anger, confusion, but mostly, a deep, unsettling sadness. Here I was, thinking we were mending our relationship, while she was apparently still questioning everything about us. The idea of leaving her there, in a foreign country, tore at me, but so did the feeling of being so unexpectedly pushed away. It was supposed to be our trip, our time to reconnect, and now it was ending with her choosing to stay behind, to continue without me. This wasn't just a small hiccup, It felt like a seismic shift in what I thought our future was going to look like. The conversation escalated quickly from her initial bombshell. Standing there, overlooking the Mediterranean, the salt air mixing with the tension between us, I struggled to keep my composure. I needed to respond, to say something, because silence would just be acceptance, an agreement to her sudden plan without any consideration of what it meant for both of us. So, as calmly as I could muster, I addressed the financial side of her decision, a decision she had made alone but one that would affect us both. Jay, I began, trying to keep my voice even. I want to support you in finding whatever it is you're looking for. But if this is something you need to do alone, then I think it's only fair you take on the financial responsibility for it too. I explained that the trip as planned was something I could prepare for, budget for, but extending it was beyond what I had anticipated. As Jay's voice grew louder against the backdrop of the cliffside, her words cut through the gentle hum of the waves below. The tension was palpable, and her accusations stung deeply. How can you just cut me off like this? Is this how you show your love? By holding money over my head? Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, now flashed with a mixture of frustration and desperation. I tried to keep my own emotions in check, to respond without escalating the situation further. Jay, this isn't about money, I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. It's about us, about commitment. When you say you need to stay longer without me, it feels like there's something more, something you're not saying. The accusation stung. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about boundaries, respect for the decisions we were supposed to make together. This trip was meant to be a gesture of healing, not a gateway to a unilateral decision that left me both financially and emotionally overextended. She looked away, her eyes scanning the horizon. I could see the gears turning, her mind wrestling with the implications of her desires versus the realities of our relationship. The air between us felt charged, heavy with unsaid things and unresolved emotions. I took a deep breath, trying to read between the lines of what she wasn't quite saying. The idea of her needing time alone here, now, seemed to point to something more than just soul-searching. Jay, are you telling me everything? I asked gently, hoping to coax out what was really on her mind. We ended the conversation with no real resolution, the issue hanging over us like a dark cloud. She was hurt, feeling unsupported in her moment of need for independence. I was confused and upset, feeling like the partner left holding the pieces while she sought something I couldn't give her on those cliffs. We spent our last night in Italy in silence, each lost in our own thoughts, wondering what the next step would be for a relationship that had just faced one of its toughest tests. When I returned from Italy, the tension between Jay and me hadn't eased, but the addition of our friends' opinions only magnified the stress. It started with a few offhand comments during a group video call, when one of our mutual friends, Mark, mentioned hearing about our little disagreement in Italy. The word choice felt minimizing, and the discussion quickly spiraled from there. Dude, you left her stranded in Italy? That's harsh, Mark said, shaking his head, his tone more accusatory than concerned. Another friend, Lisa, chimed in. Yeah, I mean, I get that you're upset, but cutting her off financially? That seems a bit extreme. Their words stung. Here were people who knew us both, who knew our dynamics and the struggles we'd been facing lately. Yet it seemed they only saw the situation from one side, Jay's. They weren't there to see the confusion and hurt in my eyes when she told me she wanted to stay behind. They didn't feel the weight of betrayal that I felt when my efforts to mend our relationship were met with a sudden demand for space and independence. I tried to explain my side, to tell them how blindsided I was, how we had planned this trip together as a couple and how her sudden decision felt like a step away from everything we were supposed to be working on. It's not about the money, I insisted. It's about being left out of a major decision that affects both of us. It's about feeling like I'm not a partner but a provider to be switched on and off. But the conversation didn't go far. Their minds seemed made up, and the more I tried to justify my stance, the more defensive I sounded, which only seemed to validate their criticisms. The call ended with a heavy silence, and I was left feeling isolated, not just from Jay but from my friends too. This rift made me question a lot of things, not just my relationship with Jay, but also my friendships. It felt like they were quick to judge without understanding the full complexity of the situation. Or maybe, I wondered, had I failed to communicate the depth of my feelings effectively? Either way, I felt cornered and misunderstood, caught between defending my boundaries and appearing uncaring to the people whose opinions mattered to me. It was a precarious balance, trying to maintain my stance while navigating the disapproval of friends I had once relied on for support. Update. Wow. I can't believe my situation got so many of your attention. Well, thank you for all of your advice. A month had dragged by since Jay decided to extend her stay in Italy, A decision that stretched the fabric of our relationship to its limits. The weeks were marked by a strained exchange of messages. Brief, cold, and sometimes days apart. I had hoped the distance might bring some perspective, perhaps soften the edges of the conflict we had left simmering. Yet, as her return approached, a knot of anxiety grew within me, tightening with each passing day. She didn't call to let me know she was coming. I simply heard the key turn in the lock of our apartment. The sound, once a signal of comfort, now struck a chord of apprehension. As she stepped inside, the air shifted, heavy with the weight of unspoken grievances and pent-up frustrations. She looked different, tired, yes, but there was also a hard set to her jaw, an armor she had donned during her time away. The door barely closed behind her before the storm broke. How could you just cut me off like that? Jay's voice was sharp, her words sluicing through the tense air. Her bags dropped to the floor with a thud, mirroring the heavy drop of my heart. I had not cut her off financially without a warning. I had told her during our last painful conversation in Naples that if she chose to stay longer, she would need to do so on her own dime. But it seemed she had either misunderstood or chosen to reinterpret the facts. I didn't cut you off, I replied, trying to keep my tone level despite the rising tide of emotion. I said if you decided to stay longer, you'd need to manage without my financial support. You made that choice, not me. You left me stranded in a foreign country, she exclaimed, her face flushed with anger the moment she saw me. The accusation felt like a slap, harsh and unfounded. It was the breaking point after weeks of built-up tension and uncertainty. I didn't leave you stranded, Jay. You chose to stay. We had a return ticket already booked, I retorted, my voice rising to match hers. I felt betrayed, not just by her decision to extend her stay without discussing it with me, but now by her twisting of the facts. It was as if the careful plans I had made, meant to bring us closer, had been forgotten, discarded like an inconvenient truth. The argument spiraled quickly. Jay paced back and forth in the living room, each step seeming to echo her escalating frustration. You could have supported me, understood that I needed more time, she argued, throwing her hands up in exasperation. And you could have talked to me about it, Jay. Communication goes both ways, I shot back. The gap in our perspectives seemed insurmountable. I had envisioned our discussion as a chance to air our grievances and seek understanding, perhaps even find a way to mend the rift between us. Instead, it turned into a volley of accusations and hurt feelings. As we argued, the hurt became palpable, filling the space between us with words and silences equally heavy. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were inching closer with each passing moment of our disagreement. I could see the strain in her eyes, mirroring my own fatigue. It was draining, this dance of stubbornness and pride, and it hurt more because it was with Jay, the person I had once been so in sync with. Finally, with neither of us willing to budge, Jay grabbed her bag and keys. I can't do this right now, she said, her voice breaking a little. I need some space to think, away from here. Without another word, she left the apartment to stay with a friend. The door closed with a definitive thud, marking the physical and emotional distance now fully imposed between us. The weeks following Jay's departure from our apartment were a haze of confusion and melancholy. I tried to keep myself busy, diving into work and avoiding our mutual friends as much as possible, not ready to face the questions or the pitying looks. It was during one of these long evenings, as I was leaving the office later than usual, that I ran into Ben, a close friend who had always been more like a brother to me. Hey man, Ben greeted me, his expression uneasy as if he was wrestling with something he wasn't sure he should say. We decided to grab a coffee, finding ourselves seated across from each other in a quiet cafe that was almost closing for the night. The low buzz of the few remaining patrons gave a semblance of privacy. Ben hesitated, stirring his coffee slowly. Look, I wasn't going to say anything at first. I thought it wasn't my place, and maybe it isn't, but... He trailed off, looking up at me with a serious expression. I heard from E, she's close with one of Jay's friends, you know, that Jay's been... Well, she borrowed quite a bit of money from friends and relatives back when she was in Italy. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Borrowed money. The Jay I knew was financially prudent to a fault. Ben continued. Yeah, and there's more. They said she partied a lot over there, and got pretty wild. And... He paused, the weight of his next words hanging between us. She met someone, something happened, and now she's back here, and she's pregnant. The news hit me like a physical blow, each word a punch that knocked the wind out of me. Pregnant. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of this new, jarring reality. But Ben wasn't done. There's talk that she's planning to make a scene. To claim the kid is yours to get you to take responsibility. I was stunned into silence, the coffee in front of me growing cold. It felt surreal, like a plot from one of those overly dramatic TV shows Jay and I used to watch together and critique for being too unrealistic. But this was real, and it was happening to me. Why would she do this? I finally managed to ask, my voice a mixture of disbelief and anger. I don't know, man, Ben replied, shaking his head. Maybe she's desperate, maybe she's not thinking straight. But I thought you should know, from someone who cares about you. I thanked Ben, my mind a whirlwind of emotions as I left the cafe. The night air felt colder as I walked home, the streets empty and echoing with the footsteps of my solitary return. Betrayal, confusion, hurt. It was all there, building up a storm inside me. What was I going to do? How could I confront Jay about this? The trust we had built over years seemed to crumble in an instant, leaving me to navigate the debris of our shared past and an uncertain, possibly contentious future. The days following my conversation with Ben were a blur of sleepless nights and distracted days. The seed of doubt he had planted grew into an overwhelming tangle of suspicion and uncertainty. Was Jay really planning to betray me so profoundly? Or was this all some kind of misunderstanding? I needed answers, and I needed them before Jay could make any moves. I started with our mutual friends, casually bringing up Jay in conversations to gauge their reactions. I'd steer the topic towards our relationship, watching carefully for any sign of discomfort or evasion that might suggest they knew more than they were letting on. Despite my efforts, nothing substantial came out of these interactions. It was as if Ben's story was an echo in a void, leaving me even more isolated with my worries. Frustrated but not deterred, I decided to take a more direct approach with someone who would know the truth. Kay, one of Jay's closest friends, she has always been honest with me ever since. She wasn't one to mince words or shield her thoughts behind polite facades. If anyone would tell me the truth, it would be her. I reached out to Kay under the guise of needing advice about how to repair things with Jay. A pretext that wasn't entirely false. We met at a small cafe, one of those cozy places with a comforting buzz that makes it easier to open up. As we sat down with our coffee, the casual start quickly shifted as I probed deeper. Kay, I've heard some things, and I just want to understand what's going on with Jay, I began, my voice steady but my hands betraying me with their slight tremor. I watched Kay's face closely, her expression changing from friendly concern to a more guarded wariness. What have you heard? She asked, her tone cautious yet curious. I hesitated, then decided to lay it all out. That I might be trying to trap me, makes me believe that I'm responsible for a situation that I had no part in creating. That she might be expecting but the circumstances aren't what they seem. Kay's demeanor shifted as she continued, her eyes still fixed somewhere outside the window. Perhaps finding it easier than meeting my gaze directly in such a difficult moment. And there's something else you should know, she added, turning back to look at me, her expression a mix of sympathy and resolve. After Jay realized she was pregnant, she panicked. Given everything, she didn't know how to handle it. So, she got a paternity test done, just to be sure, you know. Kay's voice was steady but her hands fidgeted with the coffee cup in front of her. The results came back, and you are not the father. She was shocked and well, the Italian guy is out of the picture now. Kay paused, giving me a moment to absorb the news, as my final hope for the children could be mine, faded away. This was a lot to process. Jay had sought confirmation, had gotten it, and yet, here we were. She's really scared. She doesn't know what to do next and, I think in her panic, she thought maybe turning to you would somehow fix things. Maybe she thought the baby could be yours and that would make everything easier for her to manage. Kay looked genuinely pained to be delivering such news. Her loyalty to Jay strained against her moral compass to tell the truth. I'm telling you this because I think you deserve the whole picture. It's a mess, I know. But Jay is really struggling with what to do next. She's mentioned wanting your help, not just financially but also emotionally, maybe hoping that there was a chance this situation could bring you back together. It's not fair to you, and I thought you should know the truth before anything went further. Sitting back, I tried to process everything Kay had laid out. The complexity of Jay's actions, driven by fear and a desperate grasp for stability, was overwhelming. The paternity results only added another layer of betrayal and sadness to the situation. It wasn't just about the breach of our relationship now, it was also about the impact of her decisions on an innocent life. Thanks, Kay, for being honest with me, I said finally, finding my voice after a long silence. This changes a lot. I need some time to think about all of this, about what I want to do and how I can handle this situation without making things worse for anyone involved. Kay nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. Of course, take all the time you need. If you want to talk more, or if you need anything, I'm here. As I left the cafe, the cool air felt sharp as I breathed it in. The news had not only clarified but also complicated the situation further. Now, More than ever, it was crucial to approach the next steps with careful thought and consideration for all parties involved, especially the unborn child caught in the middle of this turmoil. I wasn't sure what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront Jay immediately, to demand explanations and perhaps to hear her side of the story, however painful it might be. Another part of me wanted to retreat, to process the hurt and to protect myself from further pain. Every logical step I could take from here, seeking legal advice, preparing for potential disputes, distancing myself from Jay, seemed cold and clinical, far removed from the emotional chaos raging inside me. By the time I reached my apartment, the sun had set, and the early evening darkness felt fitting, mirroring the uncertainty that lay ahead. The decision of what to do next loomed large, daunting in its significance. As I turned my key in the lock, the familiar sound seemed strangely foreign, as if even my sense of home was questioning where I belonged. Inside, the quiet of my apartment was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts in my mind. I sat down, alone with the echo of Kay's last words, stretching out before me. After 3 days of agonizing over everything, I decided it was time to face Jay. I needed clarity and closure, no matter how painful the conversation was going to be. I texted her, asking if we could meet at the little coffee shop where we'd spent countless lazy Sunday afternoons together. It felt like a neutral place, public yet intimate, appropriate for the kind of serious conversation we needed to have. She was already there when I arrived, her eyes red-rimmed, a clear sign she'd been crying. As I sat down opposite her, the air felt heavy with all the things left unsaid between us. "I know everything, Jay," I started, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside me. "I know about the guy in Italy, the pregnancy, and your plan to make me believe I could be the father." Her face crumpled at my words. "I was so confused," she managed to say, her voice a whisper. "I thought, maybe if you thought the baby was yours, we could go back to how things were." The hurt was palpable, stinging fresh like a wound reopened. "Jay, we can't go back. Trust doesn't work that way," I replied, feeling a strange mix of anger and pity. "And I can't just overlook this. It's too big." There was a long pause, filled only by the soft murmur of other patrons, and the clink of coffee cups. Finally I took a deep breath and continued. "I've decided I'll help you clear your debts from the trip. It's the last thing I can do for you, out of whatever love and care is left." Jay started sobbing, her shoulders shaking. It was tough to watch, knowing how deeply intertwined our lives had been. "But after that, we go our separate ways," I added. "It's for the best." Helping her financially was a decision I made not just out of mercy for her but as a way to free myself too. From guilt, from the what-ifs, and from a relationship that had become too fractured to mend. As hard as it was, I knew it was the right step towards healing, towards not letting this situation keep a hold on me any longer. As I stood up to leave, the finality of the moment sunk in. Jay was a significant part of my life, but it was clear that chapter had to close. Walking out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off me, a sorrowful relief, knowing that this was a necessary end for both of us to move forward. As I reflect on the journey I've shared with you all here, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who took the time to comment and offer their support and advice. Your words have been a beacon during a tumultuous time, guiding me through moments of doubt and encouraging me when the path seemed too difficult to navigate alone. The wisdom shared in the comments was not only invaluable in helping me make informed decisions but also provided comfort in knowing that I was not alone in this struggle. Many of you shared your own stories, which reminded me that life's trials are universal, yet they also bring us together in understanding and solidarity. I am especially grateful for those who reminded me to stay true to my values and to approach this situation with integrity and compassion. Your reminders to protect my emotional well-being and seek professional advice were crucial in navigating the complexities of this situation. Thank you too for the reminders about self-care and the encouragement to look forward after difficult choices. These messages helped me maintain perspective and focus on healing. To everyone who commented, your support has made a real difference in my life during this challenging time. I am moving forward with a renewed sense of purpose and hope, buoyed by the kindness and wisdom of this community. Thank you for being a part of my journey.
My family abandoned me because my sister blamed me for her divorce. I ruined her life years later with an email that revealed everything. Almost 7 years ago, my family removed me from their lives and kicked me out of the house. I, 29M, was 22 at the time and lacked the financial stability to rent an apartment on my own. What had transpired was so unexpected that I had no time to prepare, either psychologically or financially. My sister was the cause of all of this. My sister, Hannah, 37F, and I have never been close due to our huge age difference. She married her partner of 3 years, Pete, 39M, when she was 27 and they were married for 3 years. They divorced after 3 years of marriage because Hannah suspected Pete of having an affair with one of my friends. I had been living with my parents after college because I had recently begun working and wanted to save money before moving out. My parents were fine with the arrangement as well, until my sister announced her divorce. She returned home one day, crying uncontrollably, and stated that she had filed for divorce because her husband had been cheating on her for 6 months. Then she threw me under the bus for introducing my friend to him. My friend Emily, 28F, was attempting to gain weight, and Pete, who was a licensed dietitian, volunteered to help her. I had introduced her to him, and it turned out she was the one Pete had been cheating on my sister with. I was startled that this was occurring because, while Emily and I were not particularly close, I thought she was a decent lady who would never become involved with a married man. Furthermore, dishonesty was out of character for Pete as well. He was completely charmed with Hannah and only had positive things to say about her, so I found it quite difficult to think he cheated on her. I had serious reservations, but my parents immediately trusted her and did not question anything, despite the fact that she had no evidence of him cheating. They simply accepted her word for it. I'm not going to hold it against them since they would prefer their own daughter over their son-in-law regardless of who was correct. What I didn't understand was why they so quickly kicked me out simply because Hannah said so. She stormed in one day, had a tantrum, and persuaded my parents to kick me out merely because I had introduced Emily to Pete. She blamed me for destroying her marriage, and my parents agreed for some reason. I was upset and tried to stop my parents, but they refused to listen. They warned me that if I didn't leave, they would kick me out. In only one day, I had lost both my family and my home and had no idea where to go. I was sobbing on the pavement with all my belongings for about an hour before I was able to gather myself and go to a friend's house for the night. I tried phoning them every day for the next 2 days but had no success. My friend was gracious enough to let me stay at his house until I could find an apartment for myself. Unfortunately, my parents were convinced that I was in the wrong and was to blame for the divorce. My parents had actually told me that they were disgusted by what I'd done before kicking me out, which made no sense given I wasn't the one Pete cheated on. They had blocked my number, so I couldn't reach them at all. When I attempted to visit them, my mother threatened to call the cops if I did not leave. After that, I concluded they were serious and blamed me for whatever had transpired. I don't suppose I had any reason to be surprised, given that my sister was always the favorite child. My parents had never intended for a second child, so I was constantly sidelined. While I didn't care for it growing up, I had no idea it would lead to something so significant. Thinking about it now, I suppose I should have seen it coming, but honestly, I don't think anyone in my position could have anticipated something like this. Anyway, for the following few weeks, I tried to figure things out on my own. Since Hannah and my parents had effectively cut me off and I had no way to contact them, I couldn't chat with Pete since he had also blocked me, which made no sense to me. I couldn't find him either because Hannah and Pete had moved out of the house they shared and gone to live with their separate parents. So, with no way to contact anyone involved, I turned to Emily, my last choice for finding out the truth. As I previously stated, Emily and I were not very close, but I had to do what was necessary. I asked to meet with her one day and explain the problem. I questioned her if Hannah's claims about the affair were accurate and she flatly denied it. To be really honest, I believed her. Emily told me that she'd only seen Pete a few times, and just professionally, so there was nothing going on between them. She had no understanding why Hannah would say such nasty things about her. She even told me she'd had a stable partner for a couple of years and was planning to marry in a few months. She even showed me photos. What Emily told me was far more believable than anything Hannah stated. I had no proof, but I knew Hannah was lying about the real cause for the divorce. However, because I lacked proof, I was unable to return to my family, and I could not have returned without it. Back then, I was yearning to return to my family because I missed them so much, despite all they had done to me. With time, I was able to overcome it and move on with my life. I found a place and made my employment the focus of my life so that I could distract myself. I also needed to pay the bills, so it was a better way to cope than sitting around feeling unhappy. I was hurting a lot because I didn't have any other options, but I knew I had to keep on, with or without the support of my family. Years have passed and I am doing a lot better in life. I relocated from my small apartment to a much larger one, and I even proposed to my girlfriend of 2 years about a week ago. Our engagement post proved to be a game changer for me. Just a few days after that post, I received an email out of nowhere that not only revealed the full tale of Hannah's divorce, but also provided all of the answers I needed, along with documentation. My fiancée, Liza, 30F, normally just posted about us on Instagram, but the photo from our engagement ended up on her Facebook feed, where she had a larger audience. It was a public post, so a lot of people saw it, including my ex-brother-in-law Peter. He happened to be someone my fiancée met at a conference a few years ago, since she was a doctor, and she ended up joining him on Facebook, where he found me. It truly is a tiny world, and for the first time, I felt pleased with it. Pete contacted me a few days after we posted, but instead of texting me on social media, he chose to send an anonymous email. He subsequently claimed that he did this so he wouldn't feel strange about what he was doing, as it had been several years since his divorce, and he didn't want to appear like a disgruntled loser who hadn't moved on from what happened. Besides, he was the one who blocked me in the first place. So he felt strange and guilty about getting back in touch with me about something that happened so many years ago. The email contained the entire tale and documentation of what happened 7 years ago. When I finished reading it, I couldn't believe my eyes. Apparently, my sister was the one cheating on Pete, not the other way around, as she had been telling us for so long. Not only was that a massive lie, but she had been cheating on Pete with a friend of mine, just as she had accused him of. My friend Frank, 28M, worked as a clerk at a grocery store near Hannah's house back then. I would never have noticed the connection myself because I had never seen them together. I suppose they had kept it sufficiently under wraps, but not enough for Pete to find out. When questioned, Hannah told Pete that it was all my fault because I had introduced her to Frank and even told her how much he needed her help because he was an aspiring singer and she was a really excellent singer herself. She agreed to help him, and they were in love before they realized it. She even admitted that I was involved and had helped them keep things quiet for so long. All of this was obviously a fabrication, and I had no idea Frank and Hannah were up to anything. Pete was enraged when he found out and blocked my entire family, which he now admits was idiotic of him. However, he was so enraged that he didn't think much about his conduct. Of course, he told me all of this in person because the email was designed to be as impersonal as possible. He did not want it traced back to him, but I figured it out. He had provided copies of emails between my sister and Frank in which they discussed how easy it was to dupe Pete. The emails were filled with declarations of love and plans for where they would meet next. Hannah couldn't refute any of this because she signed off on the emails with her middle name, which few people were aware of. I had her dead to rights. After combing through Liza's Facebook friends, I concluded that Pete must have sent me the email. My gut intuition told me that it had to do with social networking. When I eventually discovered Pete on her friend list, I contacted him. We planned to meet a few days ago, and he informed me that he learned about what Hannah had told her family from Emily, who had met him a few years before. I had told Emily to keep my side of the story a secret, and I was cursing myself when I realized that if I hadn't said that, she would have informed Pete about it, and I would have been able to prove my innocence a long time ago. Anyway, Emily and Pete ran into one another a few years ago, and she ended up questioning him about their divorce. They started conversing and he eventually learned what Hannah had told us. He said that he wanted to speak with me about it and tell me the truth, but he didn't because he felt strange. I swear, if Pete hadn't been so easily embarrassed, my life would have been much easier. I did forgive him though, since I needed his cooperation to completely destroy my sister, and I knew he would agree. Hannah had clearly been lying to my parents in order to secure financial assistance during her divorce, and she had even thrown me under the bus for good measure, knowing that one discussion with Emily would disclose the truth. I couldn't believe someone, particularly someone related to me by blood, could be so selfish. I'm sure Hannah never bothered to correct the record, and my parents had simply accepted whatever lies she'd been giving them during her divorce. She knew that if the truth about her being the cheater was out, she would be in serious danger, and she simply couldn't risk it. That's too bad. The truth had finally come out, and I was going to use it to ruin her life, just as she had ruined mine all those years before. I had not seen my family in 7 years, so I wasn't sure if they still lived in the same house, but they hadn't moved. I checked this with an old neighbor before arriving, and I was relieved to discover that Hannah was still living with them as well. That didn't surprise me because Hannah had always been a couch slug who loathed doing her own job. If she could live with our old parents and have them perform all of her duties, she would. Anyway, 2 days ago, Pete and I unexpectedly arrived at their place. My mother answered the door, and we hardly gave her time to process what was occurring before we walked in. My father and Hannah were also present in the living room. We were back together as one happy family, but only for a short time. Their faces turned nasty as soon as we entered. My father instantly threatened us, saying he'd call the cops if we didn't leave. But I shot back, telling him he could do whatever he wanted once he saw the documents we were about to show them. My parents looked perplexed, but Hannah looked like she was about to vomit and excused herself, heading to her room. I assumed she was trying to flee, but there was no use in doing so. Pete then proceeded to show my parents the divorce papers and screenshots of Hannah and Frank's correspondence, while I described the true story. Pete also told my parents that Hannah had to give up our family heirloom, my grandmother's diamond ring. In the settlement, she had to sell the ring because she couldn't afford to pay him the money. She is a high school teacher. My parents were already terrified by what we had told them, and this was simply the cherry on top. We watched the drama unfold as my father demanded an explanation from Hannah for all that had occurred. Despite all of the evidence against her, she continued to lie and cover up the truth, so my father kicked her out. He packed her belongings for her, handed her the bags, and then told us all to leave their house. I didn't need to be told twice before leaving with Pete, as my sister cried and pleaded with my parents to let her back in, just like I did all those years ago. This was excellent karma, and I could not be happier. It's been a few days since then, and my sister just arrived at my house a few hours ago, insisting that I immediately make amends with my parents. I had no idea how she located me, but I informed her that I no longer owed her anything. She had ruined my life once, so I returned the favor and we were now equal. I swear she had no pride left because the moment I said that, she burst into tears and accused me of being a monster. I didn't care about her drama and closed the door as she began to sob uncontrollably. I just put on my headphones and listened to music as Liza, my fiancée, worked in her study, so that neither of us would be disturbed. Hannah eventually departed, but not before leaving a message with a marker on my door, reminding me that I was nothing more than a vengeful monster. To be honest, I see nothing wrong with what I did and have no regrets. But Hannah appears to believe that I am the villain here. I just did to her what she had done to me some years ago, only I told the truth, whereas she did nothing but lie and threw me under the bus. So what do you all think? Am I the hole who ruined my sister's life and got her kicked out 7 years after she accused me of causing her divorce? Update 1. Hannah is still troubling me, despite the fact that she was kicked out a week ago. I had to threaten her with calling the cops after she called me for the 14th time today before she stopped. I'm not sure how she found my phone number and address, but that's not what I'm interested in right now. Hannah is attempting to get sympathy from me since, apparently, a school teacher's salary is insufficient for her to support herself. But I don't think that's the case. She's just furious that she has to seek a home and pay her own rent, energy and groceries now that our parents have booted her out. I don't feel really sad for her. In case you were asking, yeah, I did block her phone multiple times, but I think she's having her pals add me to conference calls, so it's pointless. My parents are as awful, if not worse than Hannah. They found me on Facebook and saw the post announcing my engagement, so they want to be a part of my life again and have expressed a wish to attend my wedding. They have not apologized yet, but for some reason, they expect me to simply invite them to my wedding, which is meant to be a very special day for me. I don't know where these individuals get the courage to say things like this, but I'm not reacting to any of it. Liza and I have had a blast reading their texts because there's no chance they're genuine right now. It's all just very sad for them. Update 2. Hannah showed up at my house again after I threatened to report her for harassment yesterday. I was about to go for work, but she stopped me by flinging herself across the hood of my car and refusing to move until I spoke with her. It was really frustrating, so I ended up contacting the cops this time. They carried her away while she yelled and wept, attempting to paint me as the evil guy. But nobody believed her sad girl play. It took some time to file charges against her, but once I did, I left for work since I didn't want to let this minor incident spoil my day. I was confident that my parents would bail her out because she was their favorite, and I was proven correct. After getting her out, my parents texted me a lengthy message about how I was being far too harsh on them for an honest mistake they made nearly 10 years ago. It was comical since nothing about what my sister and dad subjected me to was either honest or incorrect. They knew exactly what they were doing and were fully aware of how nasty they were. Despite the fact that I had nowhere else to go, they nonetheless sent me out on the street. So now that I can do the same to them, I see no reason to be forgiving or compassionate. I texted my parents back, telling them that they had lost the right to tell me what I could and couldn't do years ago, so they should stop fooling themselves. I have not blocked them yet because I haven't had time to check my messages, but I will shortly. Hopefully, I'll be free of this entire family for good. Update 3. I just got home from work and checked my social media, only to discover that my folks had sent me yet another lengthy message. Liza and I went through it together, and I swear it was the funniest thing I had ever read. I suppose the poor people are unaware that nothing they say or do today will cause me any harm. I am just giggling at how delusional and sad they are. Apparently they still consider us to be family, and they have taken Hannah back in. They've decided that both of their children need a second chance, as if I've ever done anything wrong. So while they have welcomed my sister back in, they also expect me and Liza to come to their house shortly for dinner so that we may settle our disagreements civilly before the wedding. It was bold of them to think that I would want them at my wedding in the first place. We got a good laugh at their dumb message. After that, I wrote back, indicating I had no interest in anything they had asked us to. I was content living away from them, as I had for the previous 7 years. They had shown me that I was better off without them, and I would be eternally grateful for that. I didn't need them anymore, and I didn't want their supposed forgiveness. They may continue to play happy family with my sister as they had done so far. With that last text, I blocked them for good since I no longer wanted the chuckles. I was done, and I was leaving. I'm sure they'll try to contact me in some way soon, but unfortunately for them, I'm done with it. Liza is the only family I need for now, and I'm content with just her. Unfortunately, my dad and sister have never been able to think beyond themselves, and I doubt they ever will. So the next time they contact me, they will speak with my lawyer, and that is a commitment.
Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.